Hi, welcome to winepilot.com. My name is Angus. Today we are very excited because we are going to have a chat about the wines from Orlando. Now, Orlando is an incredibly historic Australian wine company, founded in 1874 by the Gramps family. And in that time, really, they've put down some legendary Australian wines, things like the Steingarten Riesling. Also, you've got the Lawson's Padthaway Shiraz, Centenary Hill Barossa Shiraz, Lindale Chardonnay, just some wines that have, I think some of us have, well, actually probably all of us have really grown up with as being really iconic Australian wines, South Australian wines, and really showcased, I think, the best that South Australia can do from a range of regions. And I think that's really a core of what Orlando does, is that it draws in great fruit from a whole range of regions. Today, we are joined by a number of very special people. First of whom is Ben Thoman, who is Chief Winemaker of Orlando. Ben, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
It is an absolute pleasure. We have Jenny Port, a long-standing wine writer for The Age, joining us from Melbourne. Hello, Jenny.
Hello.
Tony Love, joining from the Adelaide Hills. Hello, Tony. And Shantae.
Howdy, everybody.
Thanks, Tony. And last week, but not least, is obviously Shantae Wong, head sommelier at Key Restaurant. For you personally, what does Orlando mean for you?
Look, Orlando is one of those brands and one of those names that really just resonates if you've been, interested in wine for, decades, and that might be me. But it's the name that has sort of been across the Great Arch at Tanunda. It's, as you enter the township, it's, I just was only just a couple of days ago down in Victor Harbour, and there's this, on one of the old buildings down there, there's this fantastic old sign. It must be sort of 2 stories high almost, this building, and it's about half of the height. And so, it's just one of those names that everywhere you go, it's part of your zeitgeist in terms of wine culture. And certainly, from the Barossa Valley and from the history of South Australian wine. And of course, I was also, I remember as a young fella, we had Barossa Pearl, the great old Barossa Pearl in our house, usually on Sunday for Sunday lunch. I recall that probably being part of the thing that we had. I was brought up on Barossa Sect as a house sparkling, and I guess in the 50s and 60s, Barossa Pearl was an extension of that. I think every household who drank wine, had Barossa Pearl in their house. And so, it's just one of those things that is part of the way we live. And I think also because of those great old, sort of brands from, or the names of those labels and the names of those wines from the Coonawarra and from Padthaway, they stretch your horizons in terms of some of the great and well-regarded regions. They've been there the whole time, and they're the ones we tasted, and they're the ones we learned about.
So Orlando have these legends, these wines that they've done for decades, and they're really what many people, I guess, think of when they think of Orlando. We obviously sense that there's an impetus for change within Orlando that's done what it's done very well, but it needs to move on at the same time. So this is the release of these new heroes wines. I guess what's the philosophy behind them? What are you trying to achieve with them?
I guess we're just trying to seek new palates in a way. There's a lot of people who probably started out having their first fine wines as Orlando or one of the other big names. And probably my age or a bit older now. So there's a lot of younger drinkers out there, and they're often following what is more fashionable, and why wouldn't you? So I guess we're trying to bring in some wines that are not only fashionable, they're more accessible in terms of price point. They're sub-regional. We're trying to, as Tony mentioned before, we've got a Northern Barossa Shiraz there. So just trying to show off sub-regions. We'll probably look to the future having some what might be dubbed alternate varieties and those sort of things in there. We've started out with 4 wines to begin with, but this will be the more dynamic part of the range. We might swap wines in and out, and the range will grow as the vintages come.
Well, to start with, we have the 2019 Hillary Chardonnay, I should say, which I have right in front of me, and this was definitely one of my favourites in the range. I just thought it was beautifully pitched. I think with Chardonnay, some of those other techniques, they're not cheap to do. essentially. Whereas I think, and because of that, it means sometimes winemakers kind of cut corners. But I saw that this wine really had, had lovely oak, which was very restrained, had some nice barrel ferment there, some, bit of flintiness there. It had a lot of the other things that Lindale had, that the top end Orlando had. Just the fruit was just a bit more laid back and a bit riper and a bit more generous. And I thought it was really well pitched for a consumer who likes Chardonnay, but maybe not into the super lean kind of modern stuff. But it's kind of a midway in that. Shante, texture's what you want to see in Chardonnay, isn't it?
100%. You hit the nail on the head. It's very true. And I actually think the New Heroes range, in fact, all of the wines that I saw there, I thought that the consideration towards texture was just turned up that little bit more. And that's what I could see that line carried right through the range. I had a note on minerality with this wine too, more on the hints of kind of oyster shell, maybe a little bit of cucumber kind of element. I still thought it had generosity, but it had that lovely concentration of, slow ripening in Piccadilly Valley and all the cool climate elements. So a very smart wine.
I mean, talking about texture, Ben, are you looking to make food-friendly styles, and is texture a part of that, or is it just, general good winemaking these days is concentrating more on texture?
I think great wine and great food always go together no matter what, really. But I think, where our culture is going at the moment, food and wine, like drinking, is going to be more and more associated with the, meal time. So I think if you're not making wines to be consumed with food, then you're going to miss the boat, really. So absolutely, it's always a consideration.
The next wine we are going to look at is your Grenache. Now, I think we're all fairly big Grenache fans here. I would think we're all probably very excited about where Australian Grenache is and where it's going, I think. Ben, what's your take on making good Grenache and the style of Grenache that you're trying to show us here?
Well, Grenache can be tricky, but it also can be easy to make in a way. It's one of those varieties that you need to set the vineyard up well to start with, so that you can get the fruit ripe at a lowish Beaumet. When I say lowish for Grenache, is probably looking into Barossa around 13.5 to 14 Beaumet really is where you're going to need to get it to get the ripeness and get rid of the green characters. But it's one of those varieties that if the canopies are too big and there's too much fruit on there, you're going to be pushing out into 15, 16 Beaumet, you're going to get a really porty Grenache. So getting the vineyard right, and then we like to play around a bit and do a lot of different ferments from the same blocks and do some whole bunch, some extended maceration. So one of the components that's gone into that Grenache has been on skins for about 70 days and as whole berries, so we didn't even crush them. Really split it up into lots of different parcels. So I like to call this the whole kitchen sink. We really threw everything at this one to try to make a wine that not only had those really bright sort of Turkish delight and raspberry flavours that are really enticing and super fashionable at the moment, people are loving, but it also has a serious side to it. That extended maceration's given it a nice tannin structure and drive on the palate, which I think will set this wine up to be one that will age quite well over the next decade or so.
Yeah, I really like you've got the sweetness, which is what you need to have, I think, with Grenache. But then you're right. I think that, that long maceration's just given a nice savoury edge to it. So when you're looking for more, it delivers, I think. And it's, very, it's rich like a good Grenache should be, but it's also got some delicacy in there as well. Jenny, your take on it?
I loved it. But then I'm loving that whole new wave of Grenache that's coming through. And I think what I'm really picking up is the fragrance and those aromatics. We haven't really seen them promoted before in Grenache. And I think they're just stunning. And in particular in this one, I picked up something I've called a dried raspberry. I found it quite a distinctive feature in this wine, along with that potpourri kind of sweet floral thing happening, but lots of plummy flavour too and spice. That light pepperiness, just a little theme kind of running through it. And again, Grenache can be so kind of chunky. And I thought those grainy tannins not only brought it nice and tight and to a lovely structure, but freshness. There was so much freshness to this wine. So you've got, it's all just there waiting for you to devour it, but with potential for a bit more aging as well. But loved it. And it's there's absolute gorgeous aromatics that just won me over.
We also have now the Prince Shed Northern Barossa Shiraz from 2018. Ben, you were talking about the difference between the north and the south. What does the northern bring? What does Northern Barossa bring?
I find that that it really pushes towards the darker fruits. So it's definitely got the plum, the dark cherry, the blackberry, all those sort of flavors. But I find, for me, the real difference is on the palate with the tannin profile. It's really sweet tannin. It's round, it's full, it's juicy. It's fun, I guess, is one of the things about the Northern Barossa for me. Maybe missing some of the more complex and spicy notes that you see, pepper notes that you see down south, but it still can make some stunning wines. And really nice to drink now.
People are going to love this, don't you think, Jenny?
Oh, yes. Yes. Again, if we put in a wine show, I think this could be another wine that divides a panel, which you may care to talk about later on, Ben. But I think the fruit is big, let's face it. Doesn't get much bigger than Northern Barossa Shiraz. So you've got really massive, sumptuous kind of layers of chocolate and blackberry and licorice, and then comes the cedar, and then comes the oak. And I think it's in keeping with the style because there is so much meaty savouriness to that wine and an enduring spice and sweet fruit. But the one thing I would have had some concern about is the oak. But again, when you have that much fruit, you have to do something, don't you, in the way of keeping the oak up to it as a supporting role. So how do you do that, Ben? Because it's always there in that wine.
Yeah, we've gone for a combination of both French and a reasonable dash of American oak in this, and there's quite a lot of new oak in it as well. I think, again, for all these wines, they come down to barrel selection, at blending and looking at what works and what doesn't, and making a blend on the bench with every barrel in a measuring cylinder and tasting it, just adding a bit more new oak here or there, or taking some out. And we just found with that fruit, it just needed the oak and wanted the oak, and it really soaked it up, and it just gave us. I agree with you with your comment. Some people will look at that in the lineup in a wine show and go, they might say too much oak, but I think your average person drinking that at a restaurant or with dinner will probably say, that really stands up against whatever food I'm having right now, and I think a lot of us really like a bit of oak, and it's there.
And importantly, Ben, that's who you're making wines for. You're not making wines for wine show judges.
Exactly.
So the last wine for us to talk about it's a very interesting wine because at this price point, you don't often get 6-year-old Barossa Cabernet. So this is essentially the Orlando Bungalow Lane Barossa Cabernet from 2014. So Ben, where do you find this kind of wine?
Where do you find the grapes, or where do we find the wine itself?
Where do you find the wine?
Yeah, so we've been making this wine for obviously quite a while, and we find that this particular style that we're making, we're going for a big, dark, I think we use the word brooding on this wine, Cabernet. It's very, very Barossan, so don't even think about comparing it to a nice, elegant Pinot Noir Cabernet, because it's got dark chocolate, it's got dark fruits, it's big, it's bold, it's got a little bit of American oak in there, funnily enough. And it's one of those wines that needs a bit of time to settle down in the bottle before it's drinking really well. And so, it's 6 years of age. That's when we've decided to release it. We just think it's really hitting its straps now, and it's about time to get it out into the market.
Tony, Barossa Cabernet, obviously.
Barossa Cabernet, and you need a good year. You need the perfect year, and 2014 was a pretty special year for Barossa Cabernet. You've been able to find the gold there, which I think is pretty good. Again, it's really dense. It's a big, beautiful, cuddly kind of Barossa Cabernet in a sense. I love that all those herbal spice elements, just enough of that sort of herbal to show that it is Cabernet fruit without being over demanding and over dominating. So again, faint mint, faint dark chocolate. And again, the tannins were there, as you'd expect in Cabernet, but they've just found a nice kind of rounded graininess to them, which just delivers that wine as it goes down through your palate and as you're drinking it. So, I'm looking at my notes, and with 6 years on now, it's found a sort of point of grace in that wine, rather than it's just the right time. Where it is now is just a really lovely point to start with it. And I really liked it. I'm not necessarily a huge, Barossa Cabernet sort of a specialist and fan on every year, but this one really, rocked my boat. Loved it.
I totally agree with all the things you just said. I thought the same thing. I thought Barossa Cabernet, okay, holy dooly, 2014, oh, it delivers, and it's $35. That is an excuse for anybody to purchase 6 or 12 bottles at that price point.
So there we have the new heroes, $35 a bottle. And I think, as a roundup, I just think, there's lovely generosity of fruit in those wines. They've all got personality. They all speak of where they come from. They speak of varietal character. They speak of good winemaking, and they're just good drinks. Tony, what do you think?
Yeah, everything he said. It is like that. These wines have all got their individual, grace and beauty about them. They don't feel like they've been, factory made in a sense. They're all beautifully constructed, fruit, sensitive, place sensitive, all those things that make wines why we love wine, and I think that's all these are great. And as Shante said, $35 for a 6-year-old Barossa Cabernet, for a beautiful drinking Chardonnay. These are really, really well-made wines and really lovely to drink, and I'm totally impressed. Yeah, lovely.
Ben, I think really fair play to you, because you've got these old school or older school styles, let's call them, where the history that you need to respect and reflect in some ways. And then on the same time, on the other side, you've got these vibrant, more youthful styles, which I think it's an incredible challenge for a winemaker because it's different sides, really of the equation, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think you've summed it up. We've got to pay respect to those older wines. The people have been drinking them for a long time and know what they want. We've got to respect that, but we've also got to, stay relevant and create wines that are, more of the moment, and that maybe the younger consumers are enjoying. So, and hopefully, recruit them in and get them to be a big Orlando fans into the future and enjoy some of those more classic Orlando styles as well.